You're listening to the A to Z of Human Performance live show weekdays at 13:30 GMT with Chris Lissaman and resident expert Jonna Sercombe. Please enjoy responsibly. Please enjoy responsibly. Today, back again, 8 times Paracanoe World Championship and Paralympic champion Emma WIGGS, and star of the show, Chris Lissaman.
Well, we couldn't put Emma off yesterday. Great to have you on again, Emma. How are you doing?
Very pleased to be here and looking forward to the show.
How did it go yesterday without me, guys?
Best one yet, wasn't it, Chris?
Yeah, I heard that. Well, I actually listened back to it all, and it was excellent.
It's good to have you back, Jonna.
Excellent to hear, and excellent to hear Emma and Andy on noise and distraction and saying no. Yeah,
it was a good show. Today we're talking about ownership, and Jonna, you're someone who really takes ownership. What does ownership mean to you?
It's a biggie. I mean, we talked at the very start of the first show about the power to choose, and we were kind of thinking, Emma, weren't we, about calling the book something about choice? But I guess ownership is the other half, the other side of that coin. If you choose something, you can own it. And it's interesting, like, I guess there's two kinds of people navigating through their life. There's those who take maximal ownership and those who don't. And it can kind of vary, I think, whether things are going well or badly. So we're just seeing the departure of Donald Trump, the man who seemed to own everything that went well, regardless of whether it was to do with him or not, but disowned anything that went badly, especially when it was to do with him. There's a certain kind of explanatory style in life that some people take, and there's also this ability to own things that some people take. And our hypothesis in the book and a lot of what we discussed is our relationship to ownership, what we can own, being clear about what we do own. Maybe some boundaries of working out also what other people own and what's their stuff. So yeah, that's my view on it. What's your thoughts about ownership, Emma?
Yeah, I think for me, you're exactly right. Ownership's about the choice that we make, and I think it's a really empowering thing to choose what we're going to own and what we're going to not. And for me as an athlete, I want to feel like I've got ownership of my program, as well as working with world-class staff who are far more qualified to devise a, canoeing training program. I still need to feel that I own an element of it because it gives me that feeling of control. And I think sometimes when things go wrong with performance, it's because we feel out of control. So I think my coach would probably think that I'm one of the most engaged athletes that actually asks questions and takes ownership over what our program looks like. Equally, he's got athletes that ask no questions, take no ownership, and still paddle a boat fast. So I think it's very much an individual thing. However, I think the people that will go on to win medals are probably the ones that are more engaged and take more ownership of what they're actually doing.
I concur. I mean, certainly when we look within teams, one role of leadership is to try to facilitate a conversation that people take ownership. If I'm not an expert in high elite sport, but if the athlete just said to me, all right, that's the program, I'll crack on, I'd be really worried, because, you want them to think through, and your phrase, check and challenge. I mean, you want them to, through that process of discussion, people to take on board the program. So it's their program, not so it's the program coming from outside, right? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I think so. And I think probably for me, given my age and my level of disability, I probably shouldn't be paddling the boat maybe as fast as we are, but therefore that makes me want to do all the little things that maybe some people don't do, and that includes checking and challenging and asking the questions and making sure that I understand why we have to go and do a session this afternoon that's going to make us sick. I want to understand why we're doing that in order to make the boat faster. And there's definitely more talented, there's younger, there's more able athletes on the program who potentially won't necessarily reach those top medals because they just do what they're told and they don't engage with it from that kind of deeper level. And I think there is nothing special about me. It's just I think I've learned over the years that if I can do all the extra bits, I've probably got more of a chance of making the boat faster than if I just did it without asking.
Yeah. And you'll have a disciplined training plan. Do you still find it needs a real level of proactivity to actually follow it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not just in sport. I think if you feel like you're engaged with something and you've questioned it, you're absolutely going to be more committed to it. So whether it's because I'm a control freak or not, I don't know. But I think it's, even if there's something that I can't control, if I understand that, because I've taken the time to kind of engage with it and know what's going on, then that sits easier with me too. So it's about choosing, the battles. I think a great example is the press this morning saying, the games are going to be cancelled, they're not going to go ahead. That's absolutely not our belief, and that is absolutely something that I have no control over. So I turned my phone off this morning because the chat and the noise and the conversations that were going on from all the other athletes was just really distracting. So I thought, I've got no ownership over that decision. I'm not a member of the IOC or the IPC, and therefore I can't invest energy and worry in that. I need to actually crack on with my sessions, because if the games do go ahead, I want to be ready.
You're a warrior, and it's funny. The ability to plug leaks was something that we discussed in one of the other sessions. Things that drain our energy, things that distract us. You spoke about noise yesterday, didn't you? But we should just plug those leaks. And I think sometimes on an organisational level, it's when we're interacting with human systems, whether it's the people who organise the Olympics, or as you're saying, the people who train in ground, or whether for me it's like people in our office sometimes, or in the client space, where there's frustrations. Like we can own whether we let it distract us or not. We can choose whether we let it come in. I'd also say, I'm thinking some of our regular listeners are in commercial sales teams or working in consulting teams. I think it's also like ownership of the process, passing that on to the people around us. If we're trying to build a culture, is it a top-down culture that's coming from above, or is it a bottom-up culture that's being co-created by that group of people? And the top-down cultures are somehow appealing because they're easy to kind of set up, but then they require constant energy to sustain. Whereas if you can create a culture that's bottom-up owned, then you have almost an unlimited, you have a very scalable, almost unlimited ability to grow in that and to see the outcomes of it. But it was reminding me of one of the stories that was in the book, and maybe we can talk a little bit about Olympic volleyball in a minute, Emma. But one of the references I put in the book was this game Bums that I sometimes play with friends. It's a footballer's game. It's basically one touch, one bounce. So you're standing in a circle. You've got a football, and you've got to try and keep it in the air as long as possible. You've got one touch. It's allowed to bounce once, and then it's got to go to the next person. They're allowed to do one touch, and it bounces again. And Chris, you're into football. This kind of game is great fun and a good skill builder. And I don't know, let's say you've got kids or a youth group.
It is good fun.
You're trying to engage them, and you're trying to practice the skills in a way that doesn't, seem just like technical skills. But it's really interesting what happens there. There's also a penalty. So if you screw up 3 times, then you've got 4 chances actually, BUMS. Then you have to crouch down, and people try and take a penalty kick and hit you on the bum. That's why it's called Bums. But it's really interesting because when you play that game, and I think I've played it with hundreds of people over tens of years, it starts off that people try to abdicate when it goes wrong. So if I kick the ball to Emma or Chris and somehow between us it goes awry, to start with, people will say, "Oh, you kicked it. It's not me. I don't want to be punished. I don't want to be the one who did something wrong. It wasn't me." Let's say it went equally distant between the two of you. You would both look at each other and say, "Well, it's them that should get the penalty, not me." And I just have loved playing around with this over the years, of putting my hand up and saying, "Well, I'll take responsibility for that. I'll take a letter against my name for that." And it can be really transformative on a kind of bottom-up culture when you can persuade people to own the mistakes, even if it's a bit more ownership of the mistake than they really need to, but to create that culture where people will put their hand up and say, "Yeah, I got this wrong." And what's weird is that the high performance I see comes a lot from that owning of mistakes, and all the while people are looking at each other trying to blame other people when things have gone wrong, the group performance goes down. But once you can get people saying, like, "Yeah, that's gone wrong, I take responsibility for that," it catches, and then suddenly the actual team performance gets really high because no one's really worrying about who did things wrong. Ironically, things going wrong diminish.
Have you seen that kind of thing happen in your team, Emma? I'm just interested in picking up on that.
Yeah, I think we do see it. I think there's definitely in any group, like Jonna says, whether it's sport or business, there's always that moment, isn't there, when something happens where people go, "It's not my fault. Absolutely not my fault." And I think you do see that. And I think generally we see the same characters then trying to either step up and fix it or take responsibility. But there's always the same ones that absolutely won't. And it's generally probably them that that made it go wrong in the first place. So we try and combat it with a really strong culture as well, and an agreement about how we want to behave, particularly if we go away on trips or whatever it might be. But it's hard, isn't it? People are all different, and I think the volleyball that you're mentioning, Jonna, is another great example, because it was a very diverse group of people that were thrown together because they were female and disabled to try and make a volleyball team to go to the London 2012 games, and that in itself created real challenges, but ultimately probably the biggest one was around ownership and also values and what we were trying to achieve.
Yeah, but that ownership is about it is a subset of people's values, isn't it? I think again we work very hard in our team culture. Maximal ownership, it becomes a value, and so then the finger pointing or abdicating disappears. We've got this kind of, it's almost like a company meme, but tea bags in the kitchen sink. Like, you know, I've worked in a few companies where the kitchen was always, of the coffee area, where it was always a mess. And I remember one organisation, I decided that I'd just make it my duty every day to tidy the whole thing up. And then my boss, who was like right at the top of the company, one of the owners came to me and said, like, why are you wasting your time clearing up the kitchen? It's like, no, this is how you create a great culture. If that kitchen's tidy, if people see that as one of the more senior managers in this company, I will make it my priority to tidy it up, then they will catch that. And he was looking like, this is a waste of time. It's like, this is for me fundamental. Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's in our company, I'm always very proud when I come in and everything's exactly where it should be. Things are tidied up, things are put away, it's spotless. And people in our office area from other offices will come and say, wow, it's tidy in here. In fact, we shouldn't say this, but we can see an office across the road, can't we, Chris, from a similar sized company, and it is a shipwreck in there. And you know, their office manager is always tidying us up. It's like, this will never work unless you can get people to own it.
But I think it's interesting. So I've been watching a lot of the Big Bash League, you know, the cricket that's on at the minute.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And
are you thinking of, is that your next big sporting endeavour?
Well, I don't know, but I think it's just, I've known it's been on, but I've never really been as involved as I have been over the last few weeks. And there was a great example of that ownership where one of the teams, I think it's the Strikers, their fielding is just absolutely immense. And I think it's because they must have had an agreed behaviour and agreed ownership that any ball that is in the air is their, you know,
it's their responsibility.
So there are always two of them going for that ball. And I've seen numerous examples in the last few games where two of them have gone for the ball because it's ownership, and they've obviously had communication as well. But because there's two of them there, they've caught the ball. One of them's jumped up, flicked it in the air, and the other one's caught it. So they've saved a 6 and got somebody out. And it happened 3 times in one game. And that, to me, is a brilliant example of the fact they've got an agreed behaviour that goes with values and ownership. That means they're going to perform better than anyone else because they're all buying into it. And I think that's been my experience of where things have gone wrong in the volleyball. Was we didn't have that.
Yeah.
That agreed behaviour, and that's what we try and do in the canoeing. Is we try to have an agreed set, and it doesn't always work. But
that agreed behaviour is really important, isn't it? And John, you mentioned that company culture. How do you create a culture of more ownership? It's a hard thing to tell people to do because you want them to proactively take the ownership themselves, right?
Well, I'm going to reference my own dear mother for this. My mum's a pretty savvy woman when it comes to how to get people to do things. Very socially warm and lovely, but she used to say to me, I'm not going to tidy your bedroom, but I will come and sit and read the paper while you do it. And she said it even nicer than actually. But you know, this idea that we'll do things for people that they could or should do themselves, we actually are taking away from their power to take ownership. I was mentioning, Chris, on one of our earlier shows, management is kind of, I always feel management is the job that you have to do, that everything in management you wish you didn't have to do, you feel like someone else should have done. And, you know, I shouldn't have to check that people have said that they will have executed by the end of the week what they said they'd do at the start of the week. That's not you shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to check for spelling mistakes on a piece of client comms that's going out, or, you know, I shouldn't have to check someone sent an invoice. I shouldn't have to check that someone's going to be where they're going to be. But you want to minimise all that as a manager or a leader, and therefore you've got a choice. You can either set up systems and process where you're always checking, or you can promote ownership. And so I think building that culture, Chris, like you were talking about there, is to relentlessly press on ownership. And one of my mentors says to me to create a little bit of peer pressure, a little bit of, not the wrong kind of humiliation, but it's accountability by another name, isn't it? We sat down yesterday, didn't we, on 4:30 and said, like, let's go through and give ourselves a score out of 10. Every action we said on Monday would get done, which ones are done. I don't know how you felt, but even I felt a little bit uncomfortable because I could immediately see those things I'd said on Monday that would be done, that were not done. And we gave ourselves a score out of the 30 things that we said we'd do on Monday, which ones have been done. And across all levels of the company, from business directors all the way down, all of us had not quite done something that we had said we would do on Monday by Wednesday afternoon and didn't have it in process. So like you're using the right kind of pressure to create that ownership, a little bit of social humiliation to some extent, or peer pressure or whatever, not a bad thing.
No, not at all. And Emma, what kind of things come into our head? We talked about noise yesterday. What kind of things tempt us to avoid ownership?
I think probably in my sort of world, it's when there's really big things at stake. So, I guess it's around the racing and bits and bobs like that. There's probably more situations where people are, oh, that's not my fault. But actually, if I turn up to a race and my spare paddle isn't where it's supposed to be, I've got no one else to blame. And it happened actually at a competition. One of the athletes was going out and she couldn't find her paddle. The spare paddle wasn't where it said it was. She said, well, the coach had it. Coach said she had it. The clock's ticking. It was just an absolute car crash. Now she actually went on with a different paddle and did all right. But it's just, really good examples of when pressure is high. I think people sometimes shy away, whereas actually some personalities under pressure might then take everything on themselves, which is equally, damaging. So I think for me, it's about being really clear about what I can control and therefore what I can own and what I can turn up with. And that is quite positive for me to be able to say, I know I've done everything I possibly could and owned all the decisions around me that are going to mean that I'm in the best position to perform in this moment that's coming up. Yeah. If there's any doubt in that, or if I'm having some kind of internal dialogue with myself over what I could or couldn't have done or shouldn't have done, that's when the wheels could come off.
Yeah, you said something really interesting there, that you could take on too much and actually take on too much ownership and think that perhaps everything is your fault. And the paddle that was supposed to be in the right place is your fault because of X, Y, Z. Is there kind of a negative ownership we could perhaps take on as well if we're not careful?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, this is probably not just within sport. I went through a phase and probably still do. I tend to want everyone else to perform well and move with us as a world-class group. And therefore, I kind of take on the fact that so-and-so might be late or so-and-so might not have turned up with the right kit, or and I take that quite personally as almost like my mission to get us all along. And actually it's the athletes that have a single focus and are not bothered about anybody else that are going to be less stressed and perform, because they're not taking that kind of baggage along with them. So for me, it's a real balance, because the team is so important, the kind of culture is so important. I want us all to step on and behave like this, but actually it's nothing to do with me. I can't own the fact that another adult doesn't want to warm up properly or turn up on time.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it, that our frustration with others' lack of ownerships, we have to own our response to that. Put in a boundary, like we're talking about noise. Say it's still their responsibility. I've seen it with people that have worked in our business. It's like, let's say they didn't follow up on some sales opportunities. It really frustrates me, because I believe in taking full responsibility with the opportunities that you have. And yet, if I allow that noise to influence me, my own performance diminishes. And therefore, I have to say, well, that is their behaviour. That's their choice. As you say, they're a full adult. They know how it works. They haven't done it. I must control my emotions and not let that, for example, degrade our relationship. Or
I found it quite useful to have a script. I do quite a lot of prep work, and I have some post-its with like a script on it where I ask myself questions. Can I control this? That's a yes or a no. That will direct where you're going to go with it. Is this helpful? Is it helpful to my performance to be worrying that Dave's forgotten his jacket? Probably not. No. And do I need?
That's not in the catchphrases of elite sport. Like self-talk on the start line of the Olympics. I can't believe Dave forgot his jacket.
Yeah, but in the moment,
it's the kind of thing that comes in,
really
isn't it?
Put me off.
Yeah, it's the kind of things that come in, and you think, you know, and all I really need to do is focus on what I've got on, and that is going to make the difference rather than. So I think for me it is quite a juggling act, and I think it's something that we can often fall down on, because like you said, you want everyone to take the opportunities the same way you do, but we're all different, and that is fundamentally human nature, and therefore those of us that want to kind of do that have to then check ourselves almost, and I found those questions quite helpful to get it in perspective.
But you've got to have a performance process in place. You work in a place, you've got performance culture, you've got performance, you know, you're in an elite world. I do think that having those basic standards, we've talked before about footballers turning up to training, like if they're not on time, they get fined. That's just it. If they turn up with a bad attitude all the time, eventually they'll get sold. So I think, you know, we can put in place elite culture and a high performance culture, and therefore that just takes away a whole lot of both opportunity for getting it wrong and all the conversations and baggage that come with that.
Yeah.
I'd much rather be talking with someone in our business about a capacity problem we've got because we've sold so much work than you know, why we're not hitting our figures. Therefore, I need to put in place a system that helps people to get to that high level of performance and support them to get there. And then we can be having loads of good problems rather than loads of bad ones. I'm sure, I mean, for you guys in elite sport as well, you know, it's if you annihilate the world competition because you keep winning all the races, and then it becomes, maybe they try and change your sport or something. I don't know whether that happens, but you see it in some sports, don't you, in tennis, or where they might try and change the rules because one player's become too dominant. Like what a great problem to have.
Yeah, and I think, you know, possibly the problems that arise out of that lack of clarity over ownership could be solved with a bit more planning and a bit more, you know, honest kind of sitting down and reflecting on what does success look like for me, and what can I control out of it? Because I think that then that clarity makes the ownership really clear. So, you know, what someone else is doing in their session has no relevance on what I can do in my boat and how fast my boat will go. But unless I sit and have that conversation, there's no clarity, there's no kind of, you know, in the headlights, this is not your problem, crack on with something that actually is going to have an impact.
Yeah. Let's move on to the habituators at the end of each chapter, and the practical things we can do if we want to grow in our ownership, perhaps take on more ownership in our workplace or in our sport. What kind of practical things, perhaps starting with you, Emma, can we do to grow in our ownership?
I think probably that one that I just mentioned there is so every week now I write down what success looks like for me that week. So that gives me the real, just taking that time, and it takes 2 or 3 minutes, and it can change every week because some weeks it'll depend on energy levels, some weeks it'll depend on what else I've got going on as well as training. But taking that time then gives me a really clear idea of where to put my energies and what I can own in that process. So if success looks like hitting a certain number in the gym, well, my responsibilities are getting enough rest, making sure I've got the right fuel, and turning up warmed up and ready to go. So it kind of sort of helps yourself out, because the plan appears, you know, once you've got that end goal. But I think, you know, for me personally, it is around knowing that I've done everything I possibly can that is the key to ownership. So that comes back, like we started off talking about choice at the beginning, and it's around choices and the decisions that we make, that is fundamental really for me in terms of ownership of what I'm doing, because I know I can't achieve these things if I don't do these simple things. So that would be around sleep, food, you know, direction of energy, limiting social media, and all the things that can be noise and distractions.
Yeah, choosing to own those things you can definitely control.
Yeah, because the number of times that you see people saying, you know, I'm just really stressed, and, you know, I'm just tired, and all right, and you say, okay, so what time are you going to bed? Oh, well, you know, 11:30. Okay, well, there's a win there straight away.
Could be earlier.
Yeah, you know, or they'll say that they're stressed and they're tired and they've got loads of work on, but they've chosen to do emails late at night, or they've chosen to not have breakfast, or whatever it might be. You know, equally there is another choice that they could make, and I think that ownership of, you know, actually I can only point the finger somewhere else if I've done everything myself, and that goes back to the real basics of being kind to ourselves, looking after ourselves, and making sure we are fueled and ready to go.
Okay. What else can we try, Jonna?
I mean, Emma's covered quite a few things there. There's autonomy, there's thinking about taking responsibility, reviewing your commitments, I think is really important. So as you're saying, if you're overcommitted, you probably won't do anything well. You'll then need excuses as to why you haven't done anything well. So I I mean, maybe I'm too far gone the other way on this, but I'm really happy to just review my commitments and not do things, and make sure that I've got committed to only the things that I can do at the level that I'm happy with. And people will try and get other things into your priority list, but the kind of international travel made me quite selfish about that in some ways, thinking if I want to do a good job on these training programs when I'm flying overseas, I need to arrive at them in top condition. Not unlike an athlete, I can't arrive tired. I can't arrive with 20 emails to do every night. I can't arrive with a project that needs working on whilst I'm doing this training delivery. I need to arrive with nothing in my agenda, nothing on my mind, and do a great job. And therefore, it makes you review what you'll say yes to and what you can commit to, and expectations of others. I know when I had a young family, I started doing something which it seems really counterintuitive, but I might go away for a 10-day project. I actually started going away a day earlier if I was traveling overseas, so that I arrived at the thing really, really rested and ready to go, did my good work, didn't fly straight home that night, but flew home the following morning to arrive back to my family rested and ready to go. And it felt really wrong because it was putting my wife and kids through an extra day or two of me not being there. But it meant I did the work really well. And then when I came home, I did the family life really well. And I know many, many people don't think like that about those kind of things. They think, the faster I can get back, the better, which is true to some extent. But what version of you do your family and friends want? Do they want the one that's present but drained, or there, fully energized and ready to go?
If I was going to fully own something, what would I have to eliminate, and how would I have to surround that thing with time and no noise?
Yeah. So I mean, in that situation, the thing where that time got stolen from was friendships, and there was less time for socializing. But I've run a pub. I don't need to go to the pub.
But I think maybe the people listening, there's a really great example of people that are having to work from home might have slipped into this, well, I'll go to my desk early or I'll stay at my desk late just because I'm at home. And I think that's a really dangerous place to be. And I think the lockdown experience is a real great opportunity for us to own our time and the things that we know are good for us. So I wonder how many people are still making sure, if they, in the old world, they were commuting, they had some time where they could read their book or listen to a podcast or whatever. How many of them are building that into their day at home? Probably not. How many people are building in some exercise that they used to get when they walked from the station to the office or whatever it might be? Yeah. That's all ownership. And that it's those powerful things that we need to make the effort to do diligently that will then mean that we're able to perform.
I always find myself commuting either to work or from work by adding in my exercise immediately before or after. In the summer,
I was going to say that lots of people commuting by just taking a walk.
Yeah, in the summer I was doing a 2-hour bike ride to work, obviously starting and finishing at home. It's a good thing to do. We're running out of time, aren't we, Chris?
Right, well, we are running out of time. Just 1 minute left. So thank you, Emma, for joining us again.
No problem.
I'm glad yesterday's show didn't put you off coming back. It'd be great to have you on again. That's all we got time for. Thank you for joining the A to Z of Human Performance. Jonna, play us out with the jingle.